Welcome to Stock Therapy with Penny Queen. Today I have the CEO of Rocket Doctor, Dr. Bill Cherniak. Bill, welcome.
Thanks.
All right, so before I get started, I need to remind everyone that this is disseminated by Rocket Doctor AI. And also, we've had a new stock symbol on the US side. On the OTC, it is now AIRDF. All right, we have some breaking news today. But before we get to that, I have a couple questions I want to ask you, and I wanted to talk about the Q2 financials that came out and the Rocket Doctor revenue.
Yeah, great. Well, we're pumped to have that out in public. We were able to report our earnings for the first time. Reported 500,000 in revenue, 89% gross margins, and still pushing on the targets that we set for ourselves on the growth side of things under the acquisition. Yeah, really excited to announce those.
One of the big things that we've kind of glossed over before that I think is very, very critical and exciting here is your customer acquisition costs. So what is that right now, and where do you see that going to?
Yeah, we have a number of service lines, provinces, states. Each different geographic area and specialty has its own customer acquisition cost or CAC, which we, match back to the amount of revenue that we drive on each visit. But if you kind of take a holistic approach across everything and put it all together, it's something like $3 a patient basically is what we spend to acquire a new customer.
That's really exciting. And the the amount that each visit generates for you is
Yeah, so the average, again, it alternates based on all those things I just said, but the average is something like $9 a visit is what we get to spend three, essentially.
perfect. Perfect. Okay, so that's really good math, right?
Yeah,
I mean, by that
exactly.
first
Yeah.
by the first visit, a patient is already, it tripled that return on the investment. So I'm excited to see how this goes as you grow in terms of not just patients but also doctors on the marketplace. One thing that I want to make sure to cover is that you're a digital health platform and marketplace. And how is this different from just a telehealth platform?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in people's mind's eye, the typical perception of, as you say, telehealth or virtual care are entities that we describe and I think about as like telehealth 1.0. So they're companies that existed before the pandemic and they served a particular niche, which was a virtual walk-in clinic or virtual urgent care. Need something 5 minutes or less, come to us. And, quite frankly, I think about that as like a hamburger stand of medicine. It's like we'll flip you a hamburger, we'll pop it out, it's quick, convenient. But what you lack there is the sophistication to A, know everything about the patient, B, to order labs, imaging, make specialist referrals, book follow-up appointments. And so our whole model is medicine. It's not just a virtual walk-in clinic, virtual urgent care, a typical telehealth platform. It's a Shopify for physicians. So we're empowering independent doctors to build and scale our own independent practices, which means that a physician practices medicine. They don't practice quote unquote virtual care. So I've seen thousands of patients on the platform. It's very different. I'm not told how to see a patient, how much time I have, what the things are. I get to describe what I'm confident managing virtually. Then I can do that as I like. So ordering again the labs, just like you would at any family doctor's office that you go to.
So it sounds like to me from a doctor's perspective that you're more of an entrepreneur than an employee, right?
Hmm.
It's your practice.
Yep.
You're saying what you're going to see, who you're going to see, when you're going to see them. Um, can you talk about the average number of visits that you're getting out of uh, users in Canada and what your expectations are in the US?
Yeah. What we know across the platform is that typically, there's some doctors that we think about as super users that run full-time practices on the system, 40, 60 hours a week. And we really, nurture and support those physicians. Then the average is about 7 hours a week. And the way to think about that conceptually is, we all have the idea in our head of the country doctor that, runs a practice. They treat you from, they deliver your baby and then manage them until they have kids of their own, and that's a nice image, but the idea of work as a society has changed in the last 20 years, where people don't pick one job and work it for 40 years and retire. People have multiple different jobs, and clinical medicine is the same way. People have multiple clinical duties. So the physicians on the platform are doing a mix of in-person, virtual care, emergency departments, walk-in clinics, family practices. And yeah, the average is about 7 hours a week. We see the same pattern taking shape in the United States, where again, we're empowering doctors to not be under the thumb of corporate medicine, but to actually be able to build our own schedules and to pick up work as you like in a much more flexible option that often is not available to American physicians, actually, more than Canadian doctors. Like, I've worked for Kaiser and in different US entities, and you're really like, you got a set number of hours, you're going to work this thing, you have your revenue generating units, your RVUs you have to hit. And we just say, you work when you want to, tell us what you want, and then we'll set you up.
Okay. How many average appointments are you getting out of a patient on the Canadian side? And then what do you expect on the US side?
Yeah, so similarly, some folks require a lot of healthcare, and so we have people that will have 15 to 20 appointments a year because they have chronic medical needs that requires that. Some people will do a visit a year. The typical statistic is with an average family doc, you're looking for like 2 to 3 appointments per year. And what we're seeing on the platform is across everyone averaged out, it's like 1.7, 1.8 visits over the course of a year or two. And so what we're targeting is basically to try to hit that kind of typical primary care metric.
So I noticed that like you have in California and in New York with Medicaid, Medicare type patients, do you anticipate more appointments out of those patients
Yeah,
based on age or chronic illness?
totally. I think it's going to look fairly similar, but perhaps more because often unlike the single payer health insurance in the provinces in Canada, where any person can take that single payer and go to any clinician, they'll accept it. You can see them in California as an example. If you're on Medicaid, you're not only just, restricted to Medicaid for what providers take that, you're restricted to the managed care plan of Medicaid in that specific geographic area where you live. So you're pretty constrained on what doctors you can see. So there's a real challenge for patients to access clinical care when you're on that health insurance. And Medicare is somewhat similar, a little bit more flexible, but by focusing on those two forms of insurance, it means that the folks that come into the system, when they realize, oh, I can get access to care and it's covered by my insurance, and you have board certified, top level docs, they just keep coming back because often they also have a fair number of chronic health needs.
All right, well, let's get you breaking news. And first off, congratulations. You've announced a contract with Aetna and as an in-network provider, and that you've gotten fully credentialed with them in New York. So can you walk us through what this milestone means for Rocket Doctor in practical terms?
Yeah, it's really exciting because we've to date focused on Medicaid, Medicaid managed care plans, and fee-for-service Medicare that, is directly from the federal government. This is the first example of Medicare Advantage. So it's a commercial health insurer, Aetna, that also participates in Medicare. So we are now in network in New York, both for Medicare Advantage under Aetna as well as commercial insurance, which is super exciting to start building that pipeline out.
All right. Well, how do you see the visit per patient metrics evolving in New York under Aetna? Because this is really exciting as it's that first contract. But how will it affect the revenue model given that $18 per visit structure that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, it's hugely important because currently we have a contract with EngageWell IPA for a care of seniors program that's funded by CVS Health Foundation that we announced a month or so ago. So currently, a grant is funding this primary care initiative where we're screening seniors for cardiovascular disease, dementia, mental health. But now this is the start of sustainability of that program because we'll be in network with the insurance plans that the seniors actually use on a regular ongoing basis, such that when the grant concludes, we'll be able to start actually billing their, typical health insurance also.
Okay, that's very exciting. Well, let's talk about Aetna for a minute because Aetna covers 39 million members across 16 states. Does this credentialing in New York open the door for expansion into other Aetna markets?
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing about these insurers is that they're largely differentiated by state. So we are currently working on a bunch of things at Rocket Doctor, and certainly it can't hurt to be in with New York as we're discussing with California's Aetna about next steps as well.
Okay. How do you expand your existing partnerships in New York, such as like Engage Well, IPA, and CVS Health Foundation's aging program, now that you're in network with Aetna? Do those work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same population base that's currently enjoying the benefits of the program today, covered by the grant, will be able to continue using the services under their health insurance. And then, the neat thing is that this is the whole idea of these grant-funded initiatives is that we collect metrics, we carefully evaluate outcomes and results. As we show, patient uptake, interest, and good metrics from these initial programs that are grant funded, then we can flip it back to the insurance companies and say, hey, this is working. Contract with us so we can deliver it to all your members and we can start to scale it up. These processes take time, but we've done it before and continue to do it.
All right. What does being in network mean for out-of-pocket costs for the Aetna members, and how do you expect that to influence adoption?
Yeah, I mean, it's typical across any plan that you would get basically where folks will, have within their plan, they might have sub plans, but they might have different levels of deductibles or co-pays that they have to make, legally based on what the plan dictates and what the member subscribes to. So we would just basically work off of that. And we have a technology system that validates the insurance that's built into our platform. And we'll automatically tell our team what is the member's copay versus deductible. And then we kind of frame it in that way, just as any other clinical provider that's in network would do, basically, hospital, health system, et cetera.
All right. So you've emphasized reaching underserved rural and Medicare or Medicaid populations. How does the Aetna deal fit into your broader US strategy?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's about 80 million folks on Medicaid, so health insurance for people at or below the poverty line, pregnant women, children. Then there's another 70 million or so people who are on Medicare, so seniors. Also, some folks that have disabilities and otherwise that are covered, sometimes Medicare and Medicaid duals. But so those are the two big forms of government-funded health insurance. And I always joke that it took a Canadian to see the problem with Medicaid and Medicare in the US market, closest thing to our single payer systems. But interestingly, those two government health insurers cover almost half the population of the United States. So that allows us to have a huge population base and also tackle the folks that often have the hardest time because they're not under the typical HR employer benefits or commercial plan.
Okay. So you've empowered over 300 doctors and delivered more than 700,000 visits to date. What do you see as the biggest scaling challenge when moving from Canada into the US?
Yeah, I think honestly, most of the work of transferring cross border was the last couple of years. I went to Hopkins and spent some time at the NIH and taught at USC, lived in LA for a bit, worked at Kaiser, and thought I understood the American healthcare system. Didn't know the first thing about it when we started Rocket Doctor in the States and had to really understand all the complexities of insurance and reimbursement and a variety of other just factors of how it all lines up. And then we had to go up and build the foundational infrastructure of the system. We had to create the, digital ads. We had to build people's trust, win contracts. So now that all of that initial groundwork is done, the contracts are in, we're finally in the position where we're starting to see patient volume go up. And, you mentioned that the doctors are fully credentialed with Aetna. That's a huge component because credentialing is actually a really difficult thing to do. You have to get all of the proof that the doctor is who they say they are. The plan has to agree with you that the doctor is who they say they are. And actually, there's a ton of back end logistics. So we built out a whole internal system with our team for how we manage that process. We streamline it for physicians. Because often a doctor will just quit and not do it because it's such a nightmare to have to do dozens of pages of like PDF documents and signing things and digital forms. And so, anyways, all of that streamlined. And now it's just a function of basically starting to scale things.
Okay. So what would you say the high points are of the US system for Rocket Doctor?
I mean, the reimbursement, I'll give you an example. Like the best paying provincial health insurance is Alberta in Canada, as far as I'm aware. And so you can get $58, let's say, for a visit Canadian, typically, which is good. Like there's nothing wrong with it. But in, California for Medicaid, you can get like 100 or 120 US for the visit. But the interesting thing, so if you convert the Alberta one to US dollars, it's like $40 to,
Yes,
yeah.
3 times as much on the top end. Yeah.
The crazy thing is that American physicians often have no idea what insurance pays and often think you can't see patients on Medicaid because I earn $20 a visit. But the reason for that is they're behind a firewall, they have all the corporate middle, whatever, and by the time it reaches the doctor, you're making next to nothing. So the way that we've positioned ourselves is we're reflecting all of those billings back to the physicians, which is what's going to drive the doctor growth. And I always think about it like field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you have great physicians that are providing care, patients are going to come into that. So that's what we've always focused on.
All right. Well, I'm going to make sure to leave links at the bottom of this video. If there's any physicians that are watching that are interested in signing up, I'll make sure that they have the link that they need.
Yep.
Beyond payer partnerships, where do you see Rocket Doctor AI's Global Library of Medicine fitting in to the US growth story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and this is part of the synergy of us coming under the broader umbrella. We've always been focused on how do you empower doctors to be independent, increase access to care, but then streamline and make efficiencies in the system by leveraging technology. So the Global Library of Medicine, there's all this discussion about like various large language models passing the United States medical licensing exam and, patients, I like it more than a doctor and all this other stuff. But there's also the converse side that says, well, there was an example of a particular mental health app where a teen committed suicide because the app told them to, or didn't tell them to seek, 911. So how do you build the guardrails of clinical guidelines into these artificial intelligence tools to make sure it's not just an AI run amok, but it's a well-regulated, well-controlled system? So the GLM being placed into one of these LLMs can then create something that can communicate intelligently in any language with the patient because of course with Medicaid and Medicare also patients come in all sorts of languages other than English, and so we can incorporate and are incorporating those tools into various parts of our intake flow, the supportive tools for the physicians, and then back end side as well. So that'll be neat things that we're working on currently that folks can stay tuned for.
All right. I'm really I'm looking forward to Q3 and then Q4 and to see just how well this scales. On the AI side, the valuation disconnect is massive, but also on the digital health marketplace side, just seeing how big that growth is. Like I know how often I use like standard telehealth platforms that really are, it's something that you can use when you just need to, but it's definitely not replacing your regular doctor. So having that functionality and that kind of accessibility sounds so amazing. So I can't wait to see more people realize that this is available and more systems come online because the efficiencies for the insurer have to be huge too.
Oh
So,
yeah, I mean we won Stanford's emergency medicine pitch contest in 2023 for our model of diverting low acuity patients from the emergency department. And so if you think about that, if you're a payer or an insurer and you imagine the cost of anywhere from what $1 to $10,000 for an emergency department visit versus $100 outpatient telehealth visit, the savings are astronomical. And that doesn't take into account, obviously, the member is going to be more satisfied not having to sit there for 8 hours and that, quite frankly, providers, being an ER doctor myself, it's very unsatisfying for us in the emergency department to tell somebody with a chronic outpatient primary care issue, I don't know, I'm not really sure what's going on. You don't have an emergency. That's the good news. You're not going to die today, but you have to see a PCP. And then you've just wasted your time. You've billed the insurance a fortune. We haven't really fixed your underlying primary care issue. So it's kind of like a no-brainer to the plans, hospitals, patients, providers. Like it just kind of works for everyone.
Perfect. Well, let's watch it grow. So
Cool.
thank you for coming by today, and I will make sure to get this out. And again, I'll provide those links for physicians and for patients at the bottom. So thank you.